Hi everyone. We are now going to start talking about our research paper for writing project number 4. You are going to be writing an argumentation persuasion. So what that means is that not only are you going to argue that something is true, you're also going to persuade your audience to do something about it. So this overview states that every person on this planet needs to eat, and for this reason it is no wonder that there have been growing concerns over issues of safety, as well as the ecological and economic effects that genetically modifying food has had on the world. Genetically modified food is food that has been derived from genetically modified organisms. A genetically modified organism has had specific changes introduced into their DNA by genetic engineering. Therefore, the term genetically modified food can be used to identify crops, animals, and processed food as well. For this essay, you will pick an issue about genetically modified food that interests you, and you will make an argument about that issue and persuade your audience with a course of action to take. For example, if you argue that the consumption of genetically modified foods can lead to health issues, your call to action could be to urge consumers to only purchase organic, non-GMO food. Or, if you argue that GMO plants thrive in diverse weather conditions and produce a bigger harvest, you could persuade people to grow a garden with GMO plants and non-GMO plants to see the benefits for themselves. So, there are a few steps to this paper. First off, the guidelines. It's 1,500 to 2,100 words in length. I don't want you to panic. I know that sounds big, but you're actually going to need that room in order to prove your argument. For this paper, you're going to need 5 outside sources, and 2 of these must be articles from scholarly journals, and 1 must be from a periodical. I would like you to make sure that you view the video that's about doing library research, and if it's not enough for you and you still need some more help, please note that the Southwestern College librarians are there to help you, and they love doing research. So if you just go on into the library or even click on the live chat button on the library website for help, they are more than happy to help you in any way that you need. All right, another aspect of this paper that's required is you're going to need to use a counter argument. So in any time you're arguing with somebody, the moment that you say, hey, you know what, you have a point, you're right, the other side stops and they listen to you because there's nothing else to argue about if they're right. So that's the same thing in writing. In order to show that you have researched both sides of the topic, you are going to be creating a counter argument, and I'm going to be showing you the 4 steps to writing an effective one for this class. You're also going to need to use a works cited page, and you're going to need to use MLA again to cite all of your sources that you used for this paper, and of course use Axis format to structure those body paragraphs. So the peer review workshop is going to be on Thursday, July 14th, so you have a little time for this. And then the final draft is due Friday the 22nd. So notice that that's almost a full week later. And the reason for that is because you're going to be doing your fallacy projects in between. And the reason for that is because typically logical fallacies are used when you're trying to make an argument. And we want to make sure that you're not using any logical fallacies when you write your research paper. So we're going to do those presentations so that when it comes time for you to revise your research paper, you'll be able to spot if you've included any logical fallacies and get rid of them before you turn it in. Okay, so this is your research paper, and I'm going to talk to you in just a moment about why in the world I picked genetically modified food as a topic. But first, I would like to talk about writing project number 3, which is also part of this assignment. I don't want you to panic. Writing project 3 is not an essay, it is an annotated bibliography. So just like it sounds, a bibliography is another word for a works cited page, and you already know what an annotation is. When you annotate something, it means to take notes. So essentially, an annotated bibliography is a works cited page with notes. So in order to get full credit for 50 points, I need you to put a title. You automatically get 2 points just for putting a creative title. And then you're going to write an introductory paragraph. So that introductory paragraph, think about it just like the intro paragraph for your research paper. It needs a hook, background information about your topic, a thesis, and possibly a thesis map. And the great news is that if you write it correctly, you can copy and paste it and use the very same paragraph for the first paragraph of your research paper. Now, this annotated bibliography, after you give me that intro paragraph that tells me what it is that you're researching, you're going to include 4 annotations. So what I mean by that is you're going to put the MLA works cited for the article that you read, and then right underneath that is going to be a brief paragraph that basically just summarizes the article and what it's all about. The cool thing about annotated bibliographies is that they're very useful when you're writing research papers because you're going to be looking at a bunch of different articles. And if you have a list of what you've read and what it's about, when it comes time to writing and you use that tool, it's going to save you a lot of time. So for the annotated bibliography, 1 source needs to be from a scholarly journal and 1 from a newspaper. So remember, on your research paper, you actually need 2 of your sources from a scholarly journal. So this one, you only need 1. You can include more if you want to, but I need to see at least 1. And if you're worried because you don't know what a scholarly journal is, don't worry. I am including a video about how to do library research, and it will go over exactly what a scholarly journal is and how you can access them from home. Okay, so since there's no peer review workshop, just make sure you pay special attention to the student sample that I'm providing for you in the folder for writing project number 3. And you have questions, just email me and let me know, and I'm more than happy to help you. So the final draft of this paper is due Friday, July 15th. So keep in mind, that's the day after the rough draft of your research paper. So these 2 projects are really written together at the same time. Okay, so now that brings me to answer some of your questions about why in the world did I pick genetically modified foods as a topic. One of the reasons I did was because I've heard a lot about a company called Monsanto. Monsanto is an agribusiness company that specializes in making seeds. But that's not what they used to do. They used to be a chemical company, and they specialized in making a chemical called Roundup. And some of you might even use Roundup in your yards to kill weeds. But before they made Roundup, they were well known for a chemical called Agent Orange. Now, Agent Orange was a defoliant that was used during the Vietnam War and sprayed over crops and forests and people, and ended up hurting a lot of people during that war. So that's part of the reputation that Monsanto carries with it. But currently what Monsanto does is they are trying to help farmers. And one way that they are doing that is by trying to make a farmer's job cheaper and easier. So if you can imagine that if you have a giant potato field and every day you have to go into that field and spray it with pesticides, and you have to spray it with herbicides to make sure weeds don't grow, that's a lot of work, and that's a lot of money for those chemicals. So what Monsanto did was they found a way to splice into the plant itself the chemicals needed to repel both bugs and weeds. That way, it is saving a lot of time and effort for the farmer, but that might make you wonder, well, what about the people that are eating it? Because the plants do contain traces of those pesticides and herbicides. And if you're thinking to yourself, oh, well, that doesn't affect me, I don't eat GMOs, well, you're wrong, because 90%, and I'll say that again, 90% of the world's wheat, corn, and soy have been genetically modified. So that means if you eat French fries at a fast food restaurant or you like corn chips, you've eaten GMOs, because corn is in just about everything that's processed in our food these days. So the Michael Pollan article that I've assigned for you, it is written in 1995, and that is a little bit outdated, but it's relevant because genetically modified food hit the market just a few years before he wrote that article, and it really does a good job of explaining to you what genetically modified organisms are and the role that they play in our environment and in our own lives because we're eating them. So some good things about GMOs. One good thing about GMO is that scientists are using corn and they are creating it so that it expresses ethanol, which is biofuel. They've also created a corn that expresses penicillin, so we're growing corn that we can use for medicine. So a negative thing about genetically modified food that I've heard is, for example, they have created certain vegetables, like a tomato, for example. It's called a flavor saver tomato. And what scientists wanted to do was make a tomato that would last longer on the shelf and not bruise, and could also withstand being grown in colder temperatures. So one way they did that was by splicing the genes of a monkfish. This is a monkfish. Monkfish live in the dark zone of the ocean where it's very cold. You can see that this fish is coated basically in a sack of snot, as gross as that is. But the scientists took the genes from this plant and spliced it into a tomato so that the tomato would have these elements of being able to withstand this cold temperature. They've also done the same thing with certain genes from pigs. So while this might be good because it's making the tomato last longer, it could be bad for a couple reasons. One reason is if you have a food allergy, there could now be certain allergens in things you used to eat that weren't there before. There's a rice, for example, called golden rice that they were using betel nut from. So they were using a nut to increase the protein in rice, but people that have nut allergies were all of a sudden becoming allergic to rice. The other thing too is if your religion forbids you from eating certain products like pork products, you could be eating a tomato and unknowingly eating part of a pig. So there are some ethical issues involved as well. But not all GMOs are negative. Another GMO that's positive is the use of glowfish. Glowfish have been genetically modified so that when they come in contact with certain chemicals, they glow different colors. That's what they were originally designed for. That way, scientists that were studying streams in the wild could release these fish into them, and depending on what color the fish turned, the scientists would know if that river was healthy or polluted by certain chemicals. Now, the biggest reason I got interested in this topic was because I realized the more that I read, it seemed like there wasn't a lot of government oversight going on. And a story that I will relate to you is about this woman named Elaine Ingham. Now, believe it or not, this lady saved the world. She is a modern day superhero, and not many people know about her. The way she saved the world is because of a project that she oversaw about a bacteria. This bacteria is called Klebsiella planticola. So I'm no biologist, I am an English teacher, so please do take the time to look what I say up and verify and fact check for yourself. But what I understand is that Klebsiella planticola is a bacteria that is found on the roots of every plant on our planet, regardless if it lives in the tundra or the desert or the forest. Klebsiella planticola is there, and its specific job is that it helps to decompose the plant after it dies. So an issue with this is that in third world countries such as Indonesia, for example, there is a large quantity of forest brush and undergrowth that farmers clear cut in order to raise their agriculture, and in order to get rid of this foliage, they burn it, and this leads to massive amounts of air pollution. So there was a group of European scientists who had this idea to genetically engineer Klebsiella planticola to decompose plants faster. And as it did so, it would express ethanol, which would create biofuel. Now, this sounds like a fabulous idea, but this woman here, Elaine Ingham, had a really important question. She said, what would happen if this genetically engineered Klebsiella planticola touched a living plant? Well, the result of her research found that if those scientists had released the genetically modified bacterium into the world, it would have been the total annihilation of plant life on planet Earth. This was so startling to me that I just couldn't believe it, and it made me want to read more. So I hope that over the next week, as you view the TED Talks that I have for you and read the articles that I'm giving to you, that you really do become interested in some of these topics and you find something that you're interested in enough to write your paper. So your research paper can be on any topic. It could be about farmers' rights. It could be about food labeling. It could be about GMOs. It can be about organics. Anything you want that's related to food in our world. Not junk food, but specifically food that's grown and produced for us. Okay, so I hope this answers some questions, and I hope this gets you excited for our research project. I am looking forward to reading all of the explorations that you get into. And if you have questions, as always, feel free to